Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome once again to another live stream. This is the Portfolio Executive Podcast. You'll tend to find me, as usual, on there, and my dear rhythm pal, Valerie Merrill, who helps make these things go with a zing. But we've two special guests today, not one, but two special guests today. Tom O'Kelly of TOC Consulting. I get that right, Tom?
Yep.
Perfect. And Andrew Stickland of Copperbridge. We've just been comparing war stories in the green room. Goodness gracious. Um, today's topic, today's topic, is one I think is particularly interesting given where we are in the world. The art of leading through chaos. And some of you might say, there's no chaos going. Have you looked? Have you seen? Have you heard? There's plenty around. And the issue that most people have is not understanding which way to go. There's so many options. Where would you go? Do you sit on your hands? Do you straight out into the dark? Do you walk out into the unforgiving night? What do you do? So I'm going to start off, as per usual, with Valerie. What say you, madam?
Well, I think you have to stay calm. That's the first thing I would say. When everybody else is going crazy,
No
um,
panic, Mr. Mannering.
yes,
Yes.
let's stay calm. I think the thing to do is to be as focused and look at the constants that you've got in your business because lots of things are changing. So it's being, agile and adaptive, those loving words, hey? But Tom knows all about that, don't you, Tom?
Yeah, hang on. I'll get to Tom in a second. I ain't finished with you by a long sight, Valerie. What do you mean stay calm? Things are moving. We're in chaos here.
Well, you've got to define what is chaos. Chaos can be things, for example, you've been hacked, your IT's down, you're
Yes.
going into disaster recovery, you don't know who you owe money to, and you don't know who owes you money. That's a chaotic scenario. But just generally, when a large client or a large customer drops out on you, that can bring some uncertainty and chaos. So we do need to think about what we're doing and what brought us into the business world in the first place and who are our team and how we need to support them during changing times.
So, Tom, Valerie believes we should look to our grassroots and why we got into this damn mess in the first place. But I always believe that chaos is the heartbeat of innovation. What say you?
Partially correct. I think what we have to recognize in this situation is reality is if things are chaotic, what you're trying to do is bring a sense of direction and a sense of balance and a sense of sense. That sounds daft, but it's about
Mm.
enabling people to look at what is sensible, what they're trying to achieve. If I tie this back to, I did an awful lot of business and program recovery. So to tie back to Valerie's point, one of the first things you'll do is say, what do we know? Where are we? And this goes back to, with our age group at school, you're doing solving science problems, like write down what you know first. Understand what you know that
Yeah.
you are comfortable with. Create the boxes with the things you don't know about and you're trying to do. And then create some kind of view, because you do need to look at it in terms of steps, small steps, but you need a direction of travel. And one of the most powerful things I found early doors, especially when something's gone wrong, is rather than going in and pointing at people and saying they're rubbish, or this is terrible, or you did that wrong, is to sit down and go, well, where are we? Where did we intend to go?
I'm sorry, terrible pun number 49. If you don't follow steps, of course, it could lead to tragedy. Anyway, moving
Yeah.
swiftly on. Sorry about that. All steps fans are shaking their heads. Andrew, it seems to me that, as you said, it's all about working out what the known knowns are, working out what the known unknowns are, and then everything else is that morass of chaos you've got to deal with.
Yeah, I think so. It's really true that you can't work without data. You can't work without knowledge. So the first thing I would always say is, oh, hang on a moment, pause, just take a deep breath and settle down, because this can be resolved. You can work through this. You can get to a target, but you do need to know where you are, absolutely, and then plot to where you want to be. Find the gap. It's the good old gap analysis of we're here, where do we want to be? How do we get there? But I think a big thing for me is about agility and adaptability, because in times of chaos, whether it's bad chaos or positive chaos, hyperscaling
Positive
chaos,
chaos. Right.
you've got to adapt fast, but also fail fast. So you need to know what your gap is, how you're going to get over it, be able to
Yeah.
measure so you know whether or not what you're doing is the right thing.
Mm.
And the larger the chaos, if it's a big impactful thing like you've been hacked or whatever, that's really short time frame. What are we doing in this hour? What are we doing in the next 3 hours tomorrow? If it's a hypergrowth scenario like I had with the previous company where we were doubling revenue and people count year on year, it was a sort of 3 to 6 month thing. What have we got to change in the next 3 months because our business has grown, and how are we going to
Yeah.
service everything, and how are we going to scale?
Mm.
So it's always that look ahead, but fail fast.
So
Do you also
failing forward is what you're saying. Yeah.
moving forward? Do you
Yeah,
also
I
think
guess
it's
so.
about processes, Andrew? The more processes you've got in place, the more resilient and bringing the team with you that you can be.
Hang on a second.
Analyzing.
Hang on a second. If you have 1,000 processes, that just makes business more irritating, surely.
It depends if you need them. If you need them, they're
Well,
relevant, but don't get stuck on the process. At the end of the day, if the process is wrong, it usually has to change. We had to change month on month to adapt processes to change to the changing business landscape.
a billion years ago, I joined a small company called ICL, and the first thing they did was they gave me, it said, "We want you to read our operations manual." I said, "Okay, where is it?" And they said, "It's that row of folders there." And it just appears to me that overanalysis can lead to paralysis.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's really two really important points that Andrew and Valerie have made by implication. One is conscious decision making, and this just comes from 15 years of sort of recovering large transformations that have gone south, that people need to have a conscious decision. And this is back to Andrew's point about agility. You can be agile, but this is why I think you need a reference point to where you started and where you're heading. You may choose to change where you're heading, but you need to track the decisions you're making from the point you intervene from there to where you're heading, and help people understand the implications. Because there's no necessarily bad decision. There's a consequence or an impact of it. And quite often when we talk about chaos, there's a people side, which is the third thing I was going to come to. You need to create a safe space where people can bring out their dead. One of the hardest things if you're recovering a business that's failing or a program that's under real pressure is people being honest with themselves and where they are. Because there's a kind of within the tent, you've got to understand your reference point. You don't actually mind the answer when you come in fresh. It's just tell me where we are honestly so we know what we've got to work with.
Mm.
And it's then how people work together. But you've got to create that space for people to feel they can come to you and say, I am struggling, or I'm not sure about this. How do we move it forward? Because often what happens is certain personality types get stressed into inactivity, and you'll get a lot of people go, well, I haven't made a decision. They're like, well, you have. You actually have, by not doing something, you've made a decision, but you haven't realized you've made a decision. So that dynamic comes into it. So the last point I'll add to it is you need good governance. So that is Andrew's point about agility, and your point, Gareth, about too much process. It's about the right governance to make sure you're doing the right checks and balances to make sure things are sensible and you haven't missed something important, especially if you're working in a regulated industry. There's the compliance side that you really have to be aware of.
But Tom, I'm leaning on your 15 years of experience in this field. Surely there is a desperate urge to shove one's head firmly right in the sand and wait till the bad stuff goes away.
There is. But if this is a business transformation or it's a business recovery, the consequences for the business can be enormous. And that's one of the things that causes the pressure that causes people to shut down. There's a people side as well.
Mm.
So in that space, you have to create a safe space where people can have difficult conversations, but without the coming in all guns blazing, without the anger and without the blame first. There may be someone has made bad decisions and there are consequences of that, but that's not what you're there to do. When you're in the middle of the chaos, you're there to try and calm it down, fix it. Now, if you're a ship in the middle of the storm, you don't start arguing about who steered the ship into the storm. You argue about battening everything down and getting the ship out of the storm first, and then you can work out what was a good, bad, or indifferent decision and what the learning points are.
My wife would spend a lot of time working out who's to blame before anybody actually got to moving the tiller. But anyway, moving swiftly on. Andrew, it seems to me that even with all the best information in the world, it can be very hard to know that you're making the right decision or how to deal with all that information.
Yeah.
How do you know how to move forward? It can really stun you to silence.
Well, I think that's going back to the point I was making earlier, but sometimes you don't know what the right decision is. You don't know what the right move is. Based on what you do know, you can make an educated guess, and maybe you've got some support outside you could bounce ideas off. But really, make a decision, move forward, but be able to measure whether or not it was the right decision. And are you actually going in the right direction? This comes back to the adapt fast, fail fast. Be able to say, oh, no, that was the wrong decision. Right. Okay. Stop. Let's rethink and let's try something else. And there's nothing bad in that, because sometimes what is the right way forward is completely opaque, and all you can do is try and be agile.
Can anybody give me some, Valerie, common mistakes that you see people making when it gets all too much and they start flailing around, like one of those blow-up men outside car emporiums, floating and flapping their arms all over the place, but not actually making any progress?
Well, that normally happens because they are overwhelmed, and things that they thought were definite are not definite anymore. So they feel like the proverbial rug has been pulled out from underneath them. I think as I said, it's important to stay calm, to look at what is going on, where are we now. You can do the lessons learned, absolutely. And sometimes those lessons will be coming as you're talking, but you need to be standing as strong as you can, being as positive as you can, and making the best decisions you have with the information that you've got. So don't put your head in the sand, because that traditionally will make it worse. Tackle things head on, resolve things, and talk to your business advisors or your accountant, your solicitor, whatever. Talk to people, the bank, talk to people that can give you some good, straightforward advice and that are on your team. And also look after your team. So the safe space, the psychological safe space for people to come and say, yeah, I did click on that, Valerie. Well, okay, let's, wind that one back. No, we'll not do that again, will we, team? So
Yeah.
I think that all of that is so important, and we feel it's chaotic, but it's just business is like that now at times.
Can I just add one little thing into that, actually? I think I'd say limit change. Don't try to change too much at once. Then you have no idea what's working and what's not working. So constrain.
Yeah.
I was always told, make one change in any system at any one time and then test. Is that
yeah,
fair?
absolutely. Test.
That's fair.
Yeah, a really good example was I came in during a large banking integration to a failing program that was ostensibly around credit risk. And what we discovered was the whole back end of the integration was going on there, but no one had stopped and thought about it. So loads of decisions had been made in different parts of the bank by very senior people with very good intentions. But what hadn't happened was the communications lines to the government hadn't considered that these things would interact. The most painful bits I had in the first few weeks, to credentialise myself by showing them I understood what was wrong and what we could do better. But there was a lot of pressure coming on me saying, well, this isn't happening, that's not happening. And I eventually had to get people into a workshop, big charts on the walls, and we did it physically rather than virtually because it was important. Because when I got everyone drawing the pictures up on the board of their piece, the penny dropped with the execs. They kind of turned around halfway through and said, okay, you're telling us that this is a portfolio and we thought it's one thing. And actually, lots of these things are outside of your control, but are coming to you for your platform and for your business change. And no one thought about this. I said, exactly. So sometimes you've got to help people work it out for themselves. You've got to create an environment. But it was important in that aspect because if people felt they were failing and felt they weren't being listened to, I'd partly done that to create the connection between those leaders and their executives. So the executives could see what they were doing. So part of the reason for doing that was to bring the people side of it together. And I think Valerie touched on that. You will have disruptors and panickers, but half the time it's good people who don't know what to do or are feeling stressed. And if you can take that away, they start to become effective again.
Andrew, how do you balance growth with risk when, to quote Hemingway, the landscape is but a movable feast?
It comes down to the same sort of thing, but it's more considered. You have more time, I think, to a certain extent, to consider where you're going. You're going through growth as an organization. You've got a changing landscape in your customer base or in the industry that you're actually in. You generally have a bit more time to think about it, but there's a danger of being too stagnant, of thinking too far ahead. I mean, you've got to think Horizon 1, 2, 3 to think back to the 90s and all that good stuff coming out. But you also got to think about Horizon 0. So realistically, you can plan, you can strategize, you can build your tactics, and you can build your operations to work all of that. But it comes back again. I would always say, vary your customers. What do you know about them? What do they want? What do they need as much as anything? If they need rather than want, it's a much better thing. But you've got time to sit down and consider things a bit more in a growth scenario. When it's hypergrowth, that happens frequently, but chaos in a marketplace can definitely be an opportunity.
Valerie, would you care to take us home, please?
Well, I think opportunity is a nice way to put it, Andrew. When there is chaos and there is things are going pear-shaped, there is opportunity. So even though things might be not going so well for other people, then you can say to yourself, I'm going to stay calm and look for those opportunities because they will be there.
Hey, they will be there. I'm going to return from my cubbyhole briefly. Thank you so much, everyone. Valerie, of course, as ever, our friendly neighborhood L&D specialist. Andrew Stickland of Copperbridge and Tom O'Kelly of TOC Consulting. It sounds very onomatopoeic, that. Thank you so much for taking part in this. And to all of you out there, if you notice there's a QR code just above me there, that QR code will take you to the Portfolio Executive site. Now, Portfolio Executive, set up by Charles McLaughlin, is a whole group of people who are fractional executives, or what I call part-timers, but they will provide you the most specialist areas of knowledge that help you do best and to achieve the very goals you're trying to achieve in these troublesome times. I won't call them troubling, I'll say troublesome. Thank you, one and all. And to all of you watching, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and try and look after that mental health. Until next week, goodbye.